My name is Donna Frett-Gregory, and I am a candidate for governor of the Virgin Islands. And I have served this community for well over 30 years in government service. I've done some nonprofit work, but I'm running for governor because I care. I care about our community. I care about young people. And I care about the future of the United States Virgin Islands. Thank you. First claim. The Virgin Islands government must make the development of a world-class healthcare system a top priority, anchored in sustainable funding, strengthening professional capacity, and collaboration across all healthcare providers. All right, so I'll start by sharing with you that we all know that we have challenges with healthcare in the Virgin Islands, and my focus as governor will be on ensuring that we are able to aggressively work with Washington, D.C. to ensure that we are able to get our federal funding that belongs to the U.S. Virgin Islands when it comes to our CMS, and that's our Medicaid funding needs to be increased. We need to grow doctors here in the territory. We need to provide scholarships for doctors. We need to put our money where our mouth is. We need to ensure that we are able to provide a service to our community that works for the Virgin Islands. And that means that we have to attract new doctors here in the territory. And in doing that, it means that we have to ensure that we are able to provide incentives for doctors to stay here in the Virgin Islands.
The claim is on the table. Who's got the first challenge?
Hi, I'm Brittany.
Hey, Madam Brittany, how are you?
Hanging in there.
Great.
I would say I agree. I'm not going to argue the claim. I'm going to think that your response in regards to physicians is lacking the infrastructure of what healthcare is. It's not just the physicians. It's the nurses, it's the support staff, it's even down to our medical assistants. Our current contracts, our current requirements, even within our unions, do not meet the needs of those it's currently serving. And when you come to PERB and you sit before them to renegotiate these contracts, these entities aren't bending. They're only solely looking at a number versus the betterment for recruitment and retention.
So I agree with you. And one of the things that's missing here in the territory is a state plan. We've been working on a state plan in the territory for many, many years, and we don't have a state plan. So we don't really have a roadmap that we should be following to ensure that we are able to provide exactly what you're saying.
I think that we have so many plans already, though. Like, we spend money to create groups to then come and do research that tells us the things that we already know. Retention and recruitment comes down to very basic things. What are you going to actually pay these people? How are you going to support them through benefits that actually speak to their needs? Are there even housing programs to support? If I move to Georgia right now as a nurse practitioner, I get $15,000 to buy my first home. Immediately. Not something that I need to be on the island for 2 years or in the state for the 2 years to provide. So saying that we need to improve, especially retention and things like that, for providers, healthcare across the nation is struggling. We're in a place where rural hospitals are closing because there's no one to work them. Mm-hmm. The answer of just simply saying, hey, we need to create a system and a plan, it's not gonna work. We don't have the time.
We don't have the time, mm-hmm. But what we do have is the will. And you know, what matters here is us sitting, having that conversation about how do we really address the healthcare challenges. Healthcare challenges are broad across the community, as you know. And when I say broad, what I mean is when we attract new doctors to the Virgin Islands, we have to ensure that our infrastructure is in place to ensure that they will stay. So those are things we also have to consider. There's our healthcare is also tied to our infrastructure, is tied to the education of our children. And what I mean by that is we have to have good schools, good infrastructure to ensure that once we attract new doctors, once we attract nurses, that in fact we are able to keep them. In addition to that, I am a firm believer that once you graduate from the University of the Virgin Islands or any college and you come here to work, we should pay you on a higher level than what that nurses are being paid right now.
Mainly, I agree with that, but what I would say is that we continue to
Pause. You've been voted out. Please return to your seat. Next questioner.
All right.
Hi, I'm Ryan.
Hey, Ryan. Donna.
Pleasure. I love that you want to make a focus healthcare, like that you want to prioritize healthcare. It's
Yes.
super important, and it takes a large investment and a big commitment from our government. I also want to recognize and ask if you can broaden that approach a little bit to talk about whether or not you think other modes of healthcare outside of the medical system are important in a comprehensive healthcare plan. So, for example, I really believe that in dealing with healthcare, we need to not only have good hospitals, good doctors, good plans for people, good insurance, easy access to the healthcare, but we also need to be focusing a tremendous amount on preventative healthcare. That means good diets, it means good exercise,
Absolutely.
it means an educational system that supports that, so that we're teaching people that rather than going to McDonald's, we're getting good food in them, and rather than sitting on the couch, they're out there being active and exercising.
That's why the state plan is important. The state plan will lay out the framework to exactly what you're saying. It matters that we have a state plan because preventative health matters. Yes.
Thank you.
Pause, you've been voted out. Next questioner.
Hi, Barbara. Nice to meet you.
Hi, Barbara.
Actually, we know each other. This plan, tell me what that looks like to you.
The state plan? So the health state plan is a plan that the Virgin Islands would submit to the federal government that lays out all of the areas that matter to the Virgin Islands as it relates to health care in the territory, to include preventative maintenance of
What does that look like
persons.
to you? What details do you see in those preventative measures or even in the state plan for healthcare? The previous speaker, the previous claimer just asked, she gave some examples, or he gave some examples of avenues within that plan, you know, your health, your education. Tell me what that looks like for you.
Okay, supporting one is definitely supporting our young people to become doctors, to become nurses, to become
What does support
areas
look like to you?
providing scholarships, putting our money where our mouth is.
And where would those scholarships be accepted?
What do you mean when you say what will be accepted?
Well-
To go to universities, we will pay, the U.S. Virgin Islands would pay young people who are interested in having careers in the medical field. That's basically what I'm
So
saying.
you're saying basically at graduation point, you would then do those investments. Where
Absolutely.
are we starting on the younger years? Where are we looking at how this plan for better health care doesn't actually start when you're sick, but the preventatives start in the
Pause.
beginning?
You've been voted out. Please return
boy.
to your seat.
How are you?
Okay, so let's talk about insurance. I have no problem with your claim. But what are we going to do with the lack of insurance options that we have in the Virgin Islands? Currently, right now, the only insurance providers that are available to us are Cigna, which the government of the Virgin Islands uses, as well as United Healthcare, and Elon. We have no individual insurance option for people who aren't tied to employers that could provide them with the insurance. So what are your thoughts on providing an individual insurance option here in the territory, and how do you plan to expand the number of carriers that are able to work in the Virgin Islands?
So when it comes to health insurance in a territory and businesses, that's basically what the concern is. I believe that is important that the Office of the Lieutenant Governor pool together all businesses and provide insurance opportunities for small businesses in the territory. And we can also really think about how can our government really roll our small businesses into our insurance program. So those are considerations that we can in fact make. It's all about having the will to do it.
Okay, and so when you talk about setting up, I guess, some kind of program or fund that the employers can pay into that will offer, well, I mean, as an employer, they are able to offer insurance to their employees, but paying into this fund are you saying that's an option in terms of making healthcare accessible to people who are not tied to an employer that can provide that for them?
Pooling our resources.
Okay.
Pooling our resources
Okay.
under the Office of the Lieutenant Governor to ensure that our businesses or individuals are able to get insurance under that program.
Okay, and that's something that will be managed by the Office
Office
of the Lieutenant Governor?
Yes.
You've been voted out.
Sorry. Hi, good afternoon. My name is Nikki. I would like to talk a little bit about strengthening professional capacity. So what are some plans that you can think of that you would do that. So I kind of do this on my own rogue. I do a lot of networking because I lived in New Orleans for a long time, and so I've been connecting providers across regions. But how can we do this on a bigger level that also ensures that government doesn't take over? Like, how are we investing in our entrepreneurs that are already here in the Virgin Islands that are doing this regional professional capacity building across sectors without the government help?
How do we invest in regional support? So what we should do as a Virgin Islands is really establish relationships with hospitals, with branded hospitals outside of the territory, because we have to acknowledge that we're a small, we're small Virgin Islands, and we are not going to be able to attract all the doctors that we want based on the ailments that we see throughout the country, throughout the Virgin Islands, et cetera. So we should establish relationships with outside hospitals and clinics to ensure that they're able to provide us assistance and services here.
So I encourage you to go a step further than just hospitals, because a lot of hospitals are just kind of barely holding on in the United States already. So when I think about like professional capacity building, I'm thinking about, you know, tapping into those like maternal and child health professional sectors, into like different, so not just hospital systems, but also like private practices and coalitions and different groups that are already doing this type of work, who are already doing all this connecting. How are we going to tap into it, and how are we going to specifically support Virgin Islanders who are already doing this work tapping in, because we're part of a larger diaspora?
No, absolutely supporting Virgin Islanders matters to me. So if we have Virgin Islanders who are in that field and who's doing that work, it's important that we have that collaborative approach to working with them.
It's just hard to, especially working with government.
Next questioner.
Hi. How are you?
Julian. So one thing that's very personal to me, several years ago, without getting into too much detail, my father passed away from cancer. And first he was on St. Croix when he initially was diagnosed. I think he traveled off island to get the diagnosis. But one thing that became very apparent on a very personal level was the limitations of our healthcare system. And at first my thought was, okay, we need to have all these doctors here. We need to have all this support here. We need to be able to deal with all these different types of issues here. And then you kind of realize, okay, we're this small population. We have a limited pool of resources, a limited pool of individuals who can fill these spots. So where do you find the middle ground between trying to bring those services to the VI, have that capacity in the VI, but also at times recognizing we just need to send people away at other times too? Because even if there are options in the VI, sometimes you don't have more than one option. So it might be safest to take your healthcare elsewhere.
Providing subsidies. We have to acknowledge, and I'm glad that you said that, because we have to acknowledge that, you know, based on our size, based on what's available to us here in the territory, we will find ourselves in situations where we have to send our loved ones outside of the territory, but we should provide that support. From a government perspective, from a nonprofit perspective, those supports should become available to folks who have to take their family members away. I recently experienced it, so I know exactly what your concerns are and what you're referencing when it comes to that. So that support system needs to be put in place. It needs to become a part of us. And those branded hospitals, those hospitals that are branded throughout the country, we should establish relationships with them. We should have established relationships with their beds that's available for Virgin Islanders.
Pause.
Thank you.
Next questioner. 2 minutes.
So for me, healthcare is really passionate topic, including the pipeline. And as people were mentioning, like, how do we create these infrastructures? And when we're talking about like strengthening professional capacity, when you look at nurse practitioners right now with the collaborative practice requirements within the territory, it creates a restriction to practice. What is your plan to help change that?
The law. We have to change the law, and we have to change the way our board operates in the territory.
I think that when we say change the law, the laws have been brought up. When the Nurse Practice Act calibration came up from Senator Sarro in 2020, it was shot down and shelved from the physician groups, because those are the people that are funding and pushing money into the community.
I agree, but what should happen is, what year was that?
2020.
2020. So I served in the Senate in 2020. The challenge with that is more people need to stand up and be counted. So when one group comes and say that, we don't want this, then there are other groups that should stand up and be counted, and that did not happen that year. I recalled it.
Yeah, and I think even currently, it's not necessarily about groups being counted. It's about making decisions that are best for Virgin Islanders. When you look at the data, CMS, even through CMS, shows that full practice states have better outcomes than collaborative agreement states because it hinders the entrepreneurship, the money that's moving to the community. It also stifles the growth of your infrastructure, and it reduces retention of providers that are filling the gap across the nation. Our public health system is built on the back of nurse practitioners and physician assistants. So focusing solely on the physicians or the medical doctors won't fill the gap that you're looking for.
I agree. I agree. So that's why I also believe in telehealth, that we need to be expanding our telehealth opportunities. But I definitely agree that one of the concerns around the nurse practitioners is that they needed to have a doctor supporting the work. So whatever that system is that needs to be put in place, we put the system in place and we live by the system. But again, our voices have to be heard.
Time. Please return to your seat. Thank you. That's the end of the candidate's first claim. Now we'll hear our audience claims. Our audience claim will have 6 minutes, and Ryan is up first. Read your claim and make your case.
Trickle-down economics has failed us. We should move away from giving tax incentives to stateside companies and focus on supporting entrepreneurs here in the Virgin Islands. And I say this for a few reasons. One is because it creates unequal competition. We have oftentimes outside companies who are getting incentives that are local companies, local businesses are not, and therefore they're getting an unfair advantage. And that directly correlates to how they can price things and therefore who's going to sustain in business in the Virgin Islands. The other thing that I think is really important is that I'm concerned that our focus is on creating this drive to support somebody else who's going to come in and save us. They're going to bring in the money and we're going to be left with jobs. We've seen this certainly with the refinery. We see this with any of the large businesses. We see this with hotels all the time. And instead, I think that while we're focused so much on that, we're taking our eyes off of the people who are here right now and figuring out ways that we can sustain those businesses.
What's your question?
That's my claim.
Oh, that's your claim.
Yeah.
Okay, so I agree that trickle-down economics has failed us here in the U.S. Virgin Islands, and I think there must be a balance. So I know that from the work that I've done, I know that the EDC programs that we have here in the territory needs to be reassessed. We need to assess those programs to determine whether or not they're actually working for Virgin Islanders, working for our coffers, if you will. And I also firmly believe that it's time for us to really stand up entrepreneurs, stand up small businesses here in the territory. And the way that we should do that is utilize our Economic Development Authority to provide catalyst funding to support small businesses, to provide training, but also to support them using funding, government funding, to provide that stand-up portion of their business.
Do you want to see the EDC reevaluate the businesses that it has accepted, or do you want to see it set new standards for new businesses, or would you like to see us abolish the EDC altogether?
Well, I can't sit here today and tell you abolish the EDC altogether. That requires an assessment, as I said earlier. We need to assess to determine, are we really generating the funds, the revenues rather, that we intended to generate? Are we still on par with what the initial reason for the EDC program was intended for? So those are things that we really have to look at. And once we have assessed that and make that determination, we have to also now decide, do we reevaluate this program and reassess this program to the point where we change the program, or do we do away with the program? But again, we have to ensure that we are able to now stand up our revenues if we choose to do away with the program. And it also means that our small businesses, if we are going to move in the direction of, and I believe in standing up small businesses, us as Virgin Islanders, every single one of us, we now have to support those businesses. That's the thing that we don't ever talk about, the importance of us supporting our small businesses, people opening those doors, whether it's brick and mortar or just an online business, whether we are going to support those businesses. That's mission critical.
I think the reason I assert this isn't because I doubt that there are revenue benefits of bringing in EDC companies, but I think that if we evaluate whether or not to continue the EDC program or continue with these companies solely based on revenue, we are missing out on the larger picture. And that larger picture is also about unfair competition, and it's also about, hey, are we creating some kind of program here that is essentially not delivering on the same kind of opportunities we could have for
Pause.
Virgin Islands?
I agree. I agree.
You've been voted out. Next questioner.
How are you? I'm well.
Good afternoon. So I was saying earlier, but I ran out of time. So a couple of friends of mine own restaurants, and they're not giving us a fair advantage as like companies that come down here with, and they have restaurants attached to their hotels, because the EDC gives them tax benefits. So how can we circumvent that so then like restaurants like Paquitos and different restaurants like don't like go out of existence because they can't compete with these larger restaurants?
Nothing prevents our local businesses, restaurants, et cetera, from applying for EDC benefits. The benefits are open for all concerned. You're saying that there's a disadvantage because the restaurant is attached to a hotel?
Yes, because they get
So that
EDC.
because that hotel gets EDC benefits, and that's why I
Right.
shared earlier that we need to, the person that came before you spoke about, it's not only about revenues, and I agree 100%. It also has to be about equity.
Right.
And whether this is equitable the program is equitable across the board. So there must be an assessment and a reevaluation of how the program works. And, I find that we have some EDC businesses that has been under our EDC program literally forever. We need to have sunsets on how long you should be in those programs, because at some point, as we expect small businesses to stand up and do their thing, we should expect the same from these EDC companies that are here in the territory.
All right. Next questioner.
I'm actually afternoon. Sorry.
Hi.
My name is Desiree.
How are you?
I'm good. How are you? So I'm actually happy that you brought up sunsets because I think to Ryan's original point, we're seeing abuse in the EDC program. We're right now monopolized by the Marriott brand in the territory, and that makes me sad because our biggest and our best properties all go under one umbrella. And then as I think about how long they've been on this program and all the local staff sit in the front desk, they clean the rooms and they clean the bathrooms.
That's time.
Oh, it frustrates me.
Thank you. Please return to your seat. All right, so we're going to move to the second audience claim. Des, you're up.
Paper. All right, back again. So the Virgin Islands should replace gross receipts tax with a broad-based sales tax to create more equitable and sustainable revenue system and modify the tax benefits of the EDC recipients. My thought behind this was when I look at the conditions of the public spaces around the Virgin Islands, I'm saddened, and I realize that with 80,000 people, that is providing the infrastructure for a roughly 2.5 million people, it's gonna always be imbalanced, no matter what. Even if everybody in this room was a millionaire, it would always be imbalanced because we're providing our spaces, our communal spaces for roughly 4 to 5 times the population size. And so I believe that gross receipts tax doesn't do us any favor with the implementation of the EDC program, because the biggest players in the economy are now paying zero tax, and then the smallest players are now paying all the tax. And so it really makes no sense. And it's why the place looks the way it does, right? Like, it makes sense. Add 2 + 2 = 4 here. And so ultimately, that was my thought process behind it. I don't think that it's doing us any favors. And I would love to see the EDC program modified, because I believe that we are being taken advantage of. And I open the floor to you.
Okay, so when I became a senator, one of the first pieces of legislation that I passed was the Tax Study Commission, because I strongly believe that we really need to look at our tax structure here in the territory.
Yes.
And I won't tell you to the day that the gross receipt tax, I agree that it's a broad-based tax, and it's something that we really need to visit or revisit.
Mm-hmm.
However, I believe that we really need to revisit it via the Tax Study Commission, get the experts to look at it and determine what should be the new tax for the Virgin Islands. As we look at the sales tax, you know, our Licensing and Consumer Affairs department,
Yeah.
there's a lot of work that they will have to do, because let's be real, we truly don't know. I'll use an example of a bag of rice. So for me, I look at it this way: from the manufacturer to the truck,
Right.
to the shipping, to the Virgin Islands, to the truck again, to the store. We really don't know what it costs. Our Licensing and Consumer Affairs department must do those assessments, do that study to determine what does it truly cost for a bag of rice, and the cost of energy, of course.
Right.
But in the interim, well, it has to happen at the same time. There must be that work going on, and we have to revitalize or reestablish is the word, because it was established many moons ago, didn't go anywhere. That's part of why we find ourselves in these situations. The Tax Study Commission is an important action that needs to take place to address whether or not we should move ourselves away from the gross receipt or establish a broad a sales tax in the territory.
Okay,
And
well-
I agree that, and again, the concern is around the tax benefits for the EDC.
Yes. And
You've
when
been
you do
voted
that,
out?
keep in mind, it's 80,000 people and not 2.5 million people, okay?
Please return to your seats.
Hello.
Hi.
So it seems like you agree with the claim, correct?
Absolutely.
And then you did bring up DLCA enforcement. My concern is, you know, if we were to either fully replace or phase out the gross receipts tax system, what are we going to do to ensure that these businesses that sell the products that we know they already include the tax in their prices, what can we do to ensure that there is some reduction in the cost of goods if this tax does go away?
Right, so that's why I said earlier that there must be that study from the Department of Licensing and Consumer Affairs to look at, let's just think about a food basket, those critical items in a food basket. A study must be done to determine what does it truly cost to get those items here, and then we'll be able to determine what that markup really looks like. So that study has to take place if this is going to work.
Okay, and so DLC is heavily involved, or should be heavily involved in the enforcement piece. How do you plan to support their role in enforcement in terms of the cost of goods and services in the territory?
The enforcement will come once we do the study,
Right.
because they don't have the
Pause.
information.
Okay.
Please return to your seat. Next questioner.
Hi again. One thing that came to mind, you know, when we discuss having DLCA do this, and I might be misunderstood, so please correct me if I'm wrong, but with DLCA doing studies like that and you know, I assume publishing it and putting that information out, my question is at what point do we draw a line to say, does this affect every single business in the territory? And, you know, some businesses it could be put on paper and tracked in a more black and white kind of way, and they can make an assessment. Other things they could broad stroke make an assessment about a certain industry and make a claim to the public that, yeah, this business or these types of businesses should be charging this much, and they might look at a business and think they're grossly overcharging, but the nuances of running a business are a lot more complex than just how you set your prices. So how do we stop a government from becoming almost, you know, predatory against businesses and enforce and making them lower their prices or influencing them to lower their prices?
I don't believe that we should be. I think more my conversation with looking at the price points was really tied to our food basket. When it comes to, you know, services that's provided, certain types of goods, I don't know that we could really determine or say to a business, your price points are too high. I am talking about what it looks like in our supermarket. I'm talking about what it looks like when we when we go to the pumps. That's what I'm referencing.
Okay. And then how exactly would the process look at least in a general sense? If DLC was to implement a study like that, what would the follow-up be after getting that study completed?
So what our responsibility is to put the information out there. And what I mean by that is, this is what it costs, and this is, and then you also, you look at the items in the food basket for that matter, and you put those price points out. So you kind of push those businesses to fall in line. You lay out the businesses, and you put, this is what they're charging for rice, oil, whatever
Pause.
the case is. Yes.
We got 30 seconds for one more questioner.
No introduction needed here.
How are you?
Mike Malachi.
Hey, Malachi.
So you mentioned that it's not much you would do before the tax study, but what's known is that there is definitely more oversight and enforcement of the terms and conditions that the EDC companies agree to. We don't need a tax study to determine that that's needed. So
Correct.
before tax study, day one, how are you going to provide and execute more oversight over the current EDC companies and enforce the terms and conditions of the tax benefits that they're receiving?
Absolutely. You know there's an arm right now that's responsible for doing that. So again, we have to conduct audits to determine whether or not the folks that are in those offices are in fact doing their jobs. Conduct audits.
That's time. Please return to your seat. All right. That will bring us back to the second candidate, the candidate's second claim. All right. We are on to the candidate's second claim. The chair is yours. Read your claim and make your case.
The Virgin Islands economy must reduce its over-reliance on tourism and diversify to sustain long-term economic growth. My position on that is that my claim on that is tied to the fact that we have to extend what we're doing as Virgin Islanders when it comes to our economy. We have the Island District of St. Croix in particular that is in fact a sleeping giant, and there's some things that we need to do to expand our economy, and I believe strongly that we need to start right in St. Croix. We need to expand our the South Shore Zone. We need to make the Island District of St. Croix, or the Virgin Islands in general, the Caribbean hub of transshipment. We also need to look at bringing back light manufacturing to the territory. We have the industrial zone, the industrial park, rather, in St. Croix, and it's time for us to really look and use our Economic Development Authority to go out and do the work and bring home the bacon. And what I mean by that is bring home light manufacturing businesses here to the territory to ensure that we are able to expand our, and I also mean environmentally friendly light manufacturing, to bring them back here to the territory so we can expand our economic base, create jobs, et cetera, here in the Virgin Islands.
Claim is on the table. Who's got the first challenge?
Hello, I'm Frank.
Hi.
Pleasure to meet you. Being that I'm from the Sleeping Giant, and also as I am a strong member of the tourism community, I do agree with you that we need to reduce our reliance on tourism. But a part of that I have a question is how do we diversify our tourism product in itself to grow the economy?
So that's a really good question, and I believe it's time for us to really look at what at our offerings, and what I mean by that is, let's just think about St. Croix.
Yeah.
Let's think about St. Croix. So we have opportunities for ecotourism in the Island District of St. Croix.
Tourism, agritourism.
And we talked earlier about entrepreneurs and the like. And what we should be doing is having the conversations with our community and saying, these are the things that we need. These are the types of businesses that we need. And we will support you to stand up those businesses. So I'll just give you ecotourism as one example.
I love that. I think that it's a business that will support us and our tourism.
Yes.
I think that's how we should move forward. Thank you. Somebody else jump in.
How you doing, ma'am? I'm Sid.
Hi, how are you?
Good. So, according to your claim, ma'am, it's about diversifying the economy. But how do we do that with a poor infrastructure? And I'm from the Sleeping Giant, so I had a business in St. Croix, and to understand that You need stable power to be able, you need a stable workforce. We could all create a business tomorrow, it's just a piece of paper, but we don't have anyone to run the business. So then you just create a prison for the entrepreneur to just keep working day in and day out. So please tell me, how are we gonna grow provide economic growth in a place that has a poor infrastructure?
We need to get serious about workforce development.
Agreed?
We cannot keep talking about workforce development. We need to provide the opportunities for our young people, for people in general, here in the Virgin Islands, in our Department of Labor, where we don't sit in our offices behind our desks and talk about we have hundreds of thousands of dollars to support workforce development, but we actually go under the almond trees and meet people where they're at to ensure that we are able to train them up. That's one area.
So then how do you get the people, because you have a workforce development section in labor, how do you get that section to do their job? Because I know people who've gone through the workforce development that goes through the ring around, that's the culture we live in.
I just said it. You have to ensure that your staff is on the streets, beating the streets to get the work done. You have to meet Virgin Islanders where they're at.
Pause. Next questioner.
Richard.
Hi, Richard.
In
How are you?
2026, young people don't want to swing hammers, they don't want to be plumbers, they don't want to be electricians. They want to be in AI, they want to be in technology, they want to be in content. How can you foster that?
By making it happen, that by ensuring that we set up the systems in place to ensure that we provide that training to our young people. So our workforce development side of the house needs to be focused on that as well, because I'm 100% in agreement with you. And we also need to start offering that in our schools.
What specifically do you see as steps to making that system a reality? Because right now, you only offer these traditional sets of skills, and our current economic system is bent towards construction and hospitality.
We put the programs in place, and it's bent in that direction because we've experienced the storms of 2017, and we are in the rebuilding process. But I agree with you that we have to think outside the box because we're not going to be rebuilding forever. So we have to be thinking now about how do we expand that. So what we do is we provide our Department of Labor, they have federal funding for these purposes, and we make that one of the programs that we focus on.
Next questioner.
Okay, I'm very happy that you just said that. I'm Nikki again, because we're actually implementing that here at Elevate We this summer. Is we're doing a creative career exploration for kids from Department of Labor and also systems involved youth. So my question is, how are there avenues of funding that are not so difficult to get for that? Because even if we frame it as workforce development, which only grant writers who have been trained in this really know how to do that type of thing because there's specific language that you have to use, how do we provide opportunities where they're like, for example, not reimbursable grants, because that's very detrimental to a lot of the nonprofits that are doing this work. We have to have the money up front in order to do this work. So how are we going to make this money easier to get? Same thing with the Department of Labor. They're funding us as well, but we have to wait for the money until after the program is done. So how are you going to make it easier for us to access that money to these programs?
So the Department of Labor, their funding usually is federal funds. So federal funds has certain restrictions. It's usually reimbursable. But if we are going to focus on areas where we really believe matters to Virgin Islanders as far as workforce development and training, then we have to put our money where our mouth is and provide local resources, local funding to get that done. And the question is, how do we do that? We have to begin to set priorities. We have to listen to our community. And if our community is saying, this is what's important to us, then we set the priorities. We look at our budgets, because we have a budget. We look at our budgets, we look at our revenues, and we determine how do we focus on what matters, what's the priorities. Bottom line is setting priorities.
Next questioner.
For years, we've heard about a study, a plan, contractors, expertise coming in to save us. I really want to know, don't you have one already? I want to know, do we not have something that in the years that you've been in office and all the experiences that we have around us, that maybe a study was already done somewhere?
The tax study?
All the studies, all the plans that need to be created. I do believe that we don't have to reinvent the wheel in many cases. I also think that if we have been experiencing these challenges for so long, at some place, we should have started that plan or that investigation. Where are we at to start 4 years of a term to start this study?
So are you talking about the Tax Study Commission?
I'm talking about any of the plans that we just spoke about today.
These plans are live plans. This is going to happen.
Next questioner.
Hello. All right, so the 2020 census has showed us that the population of the Virgin Islands has dropped about 20%. I would assume since COVID, since the decline in our educational facilities, since all the WAPA problems, by the time you get to the 2030 census, it's probably going to be another 7 to 10%. Meaning, how can we grow the economy when everybody's leaving? And what do you plan to do to attract people to come down here and work, even our Virgin Islanders who want to come back and work and contribute?
We have to make it a priority. We have to do the work. We got to dig our heels in and get the work done. And we have to offer higher paying jobs.
Okay.
And we have to offer housing opportunities for people to come back home. People want to come back home, but they don't necessarily want to live with their parents, if you will. So we have to be intentional about putting that system in place to ensure that Virgin Islanders return back home.
And that means being intentional about making the government of the Virgin Islands not the biggest employer in the Virgin Islands.
Absolutely, yes.
I'll be quick, I promise you.
Hello, my name is Raven. I'll be trying to be quick about this. It's a good thing that one of the previous speakers brought up plans that have already been worked out. If I remember correctly, that transshipment hub idea, there was a study done on that, and that was under DeYoung. Are you planning to revive or reuse the information done in that study, or are you suggesting we start new, start fresh?
We plan to revive it, but however, that's been a long time ago. He's been governor a very long time ago, so we're certain that there's some changes that will have to be made to it. But absolutely, this has been a conversation. The South Shore Zone is ripe for that activity, and we need to make it happen. We need to utilize our federal dollars, repurpose those dollars to ensure that that happens.
What plan are you going to implement to ensure that it doesn't go to the wayside like the last plan did?
Having the will, getting it done, ensuring that it's a part of the goals. As we do the work, what matters is, you hire your commissioners, and you have to ensure that you hire leaders.
Pause.
Okay.
Governor Bryan already completed the 2040 vision plan. It outlines everything from the blue economy to the green economy. What aspects of that plan will you keep? Because we often, from administration to administration, throw the baby and the bathwater.
Definitely the blue economy. I think that we are ripe for the blue economy. We are ripe for transshipment yards in the island district of St. Croix.
Specifically within the blue economy, what aspects would you looking at?
I'm looking at the transshipment yards, not the hub that I shared with you earlier, which is the transshipment, and we also have transshipment opportunities here in St. Thomas. I'm also looking at the shipyards. You have an opportunity where we will be able to build shipyards in St. Croix in particular, where these yachters would come in. They come in on their ships. We provide the provisioning. We provide the repairs to their boats, etc. That's something that we can do now. But we have to have the will to move forward and get it done. It's all about staying focused on what those goals are.
Pause.
Whoa.
I got to fight to talk to you. All right. So I think a major issue that we have also is the fact that we don't produce anything. We just import everything, and we're not. I think the bigger issue that I have is that how are we going to sustain ourselves if the U.S. ever cut us off? And I think it's a major thing that a lot of people don't think about, but it can happen.
Again.
So what's your thoughts?
Oh my gosh. My thoughts on that is I am actually the prime sponsor of the Agriculture State Plan. And of course, agriculture has been a conversation in this territory for way too long. It's time that we fund the agriculture. There are 8 mandates in the Agriculture State Plan. And it's time that we take agriculture very seriously in the territory so we are able to sustain ourselves and fund the Agriculture State Plan.
So agriculture is just, I think, one of the issues that we can address at the moment. But what about like technology? Like, having technological firms to come down here and actually export like different things. So
I like that question. So we have the RT Park.
Yes.
That's another entity that needs to be assessed to determine whether or not whether or not the intended purpose is actually working for the people.
Pause.
So that'll
You've been
help us
voted out.
to get to the technology
Please return
component.
to your seat.
So I've been hearing a lot about grand visions and grand plans, and that's very important in developing new markets and new economies, and old markets and old economies. But it also requires comprehensive, detailed execution. So I'd like to hear more details on how you're going to execute and make these visions and plans a reality. I'm thinking transportation, paved roads, open ports, education, workforce development, reliable and affordable energy. These are places where people's children could go to school, play, and be healthy. These are things that attract businesses, markets, and economies to a society.
I don't know if I could give you all the details today, but what I will tell you is that we will set goals, lay out our goals. I started to say it earlier, based on the conversations that we're having with our community, and we're going to hold our commissioners accountable to those areas. And some of them are not necessarily tied to department and agencies. So whatever is necessary for us to focus on, that's what we will do. We will have those conversations, set out those benchmarks, and work very hard to meet those goals. As you do the work, you know that benchmarks change, things change. However, you provide the resources and you keep going. But it's important that you have a plan in place and that you're working towards to ensure that we are able to make progress. That plan matters.
Pause. Next questioner.
Good day. How are you?
Hi.
Good. So I know you just spoke about the ag plan, and I wanted to ask you a very, very critical question that most people may not know the answer to, but it seems like you may have some insight. So from the government standpoint, not the agriculturalists themselves, what do you think is holding back the ability to support even more our agriculture sector?
Funding, priorities, how we align our budgets, how we spread our budgets across all agencies, and
I'm only stopping you because the last time I didn't get to ask my Section B. So how do you mitigate that? What is your plan on changing that? Because we know it's been happening for many, many, many decades.
So the legislature, the governor does not hold the purse string. The governor sends down the budget.
Mm-hmm.
The legislature holds the purse string. But the governor has a responsibility to send down a budget that's the people's budget. Mm-hmm. So send a budget down as a people's budget, rally the people to ensure that the people are able to get what they want.
And what's prevented that in the past?
Pause. Thank you. Return to your seat. Next questioner.
I think that when we start to dive into like economic growth, we have to address the brain drain in the territory. Those who can leave, a lot of us are leaving because the current structure of our government systems, our housing, our electric is just not sustainable to thrive here. How do you fix it?
We fix it by bringing a new economy here. We fix it by bringing new business, by standing up our small businesses. We must agree as Virgin Islanders that the government cannot be the only focus. We have to start new businesses here. And in doing that, we have to provide the catalyst funding to support these businesses to stand them up.
Where do you see that funding comes from?
The funding for, we have a unique opportunity right now with the funding that we've received
Finish it up.
from the federal government through the HUD program. We need to repurpose our dollars and figure out what works for what's necessary to move the Virgin Islands forward.
Next time.
Our economy is something that's critical and important.
Please return to your seat.
Oh,
Yep. Okay. So we're going to move to the next audience claim. And Brittany, that's your claim.
Same-sex couples should be granted full and equal marriage rights in the Virgin Islands, with all restrictive language removed and legal frameworks aligned to ensure equal protections, recognition, and access to benefits under the law. This claim is very personal to me because, I am the lesbian midwife from St. Croix. So a lot of times we're looking at what's happening on the mainland, and that's like a joking opening, but however, federal laws that were once in place of protections for things like abortion rights have been stripped away, and we're watching them actively be lost. Luckily enough, in our territory, though they are strict, we do have abortion laws present on our books. But what's coming up next, and it's being currently attacked in politics, is same-sex marriage. And when that leaves, our current laws within our territory speak very clearly to marriage being only identified between a man and a woman.
So our laws need to be changed. And what I mean by that, updated, because we know what happened with Roe versus Wade. So that's what you're referencing.
Yeah.
So from a legislative perspective, from a governor's perspective, nothing prevents the governor of the Virgin Islands from sending legislation down that mirrors the current federal laws that's tied to same-sex marriages. So it's all about legislation and the will to send it down to the legislature, or to have a senator move the legislation forward.
I think when we talk about it, we lack the cultural awareness that there is still a large-scale amount of homophobia within the territory, and it would be disingenuous for us to not have the conversation about, as even in a gubernatorial placement, how that could potentially affect another term. How would you try to mitigate the backlash that you may receive from bringing something like that down?
I think all people we have to have the conversation about us being inclusive people. If we are not inclusive, then we're not doing the right thing as Virgin Islanders. So the conversation has to be around the importance of being inclusive, the importance of respecting everyone's preference. If that preference doesn't come to your doorstep, then it really has nothing to do with you.
Next questioner.
Gonna go ahead and say, speak of the elephant in the room that we need to. What about protections for trans people? That's another conversation that needs to be had that's happening on the federal level. In the same way we have issues related to the rights and protections for same-sex couples, we also need to start having that conversation about trans people. What will you do in regards to that?
I haven't really given that any thought as far as transgender. However, again, inclusive, we have to be inclusive in the Virgin Islands, and we have to respect others and what they believe in.
So I can appreciate acknowledgement of inclusivity, but I do have to stress the fact that trans people didn't show up yesterday. We've had trans and non-binary individuals here within the Virgin Islands, and they're actually in a position right now where many of them have left the territory for a need of safety. I'm glad that we're at a point where we can have conversations and push for conversations about same-sex couples. But what will you do in your position to actually push for inclusivity rather than just it being a word, it being inclusive? What does that look like? What are the actions involved in doing that?
As I shared with you, I did not really give that much thought. I haven't given that thought, but it's something that I will give thought to.
Pause. You've been voted out. Please return to your seat. Next questioner.
Hi. I think this is a really important issue.
It is.
And I think it's not an issue that's merely about respecting one another or thinking about one another. I think it's framed as a legal rights issue. And that's why it's coming to your door, because you're a lawmaker. And the question is, for our government officials, should we legalize same-sex marriage? Should we legalize transgender rights? Should we treat everybody as equal according to the law and not just teach people that they're supposed to respect people whether or not they give them those rights legally?
I agree that the law needs to reflect what's on the federal books.
So let me ask you very specifically, do you think that we should have same-sex marriage legalized in the Virgin Islands?
Yes.
Wonderful. Thank you. I do too. These are things that I think are very basic and important about supporting equality for every person. And this is the thing that no matter what your sexual preference is, no matter what your orientation is, we need to be supportive and respectful of each other.
Absolutely. I agree.
Next questioner.
Hot topic. The Virgin Islands, as many of us know, and for those who don't, could probably make some assumptions. Very, very religious, visual, at least, place, location, right? We're not going to count the number of churches versus a number of other things. Part of the challenge in this whole thought process is the concepts of those who have certain religions that are against same-sex, transgender, all of those things. What do you really think can help the situation given that fact?
Educating our community, having the conversations with our community about, again, you know, how we respect others. We all have our own beliefs. We all have different religious beliefs. And, you know, we have different religions that we're a part of. And I believe that choice matters. And individuals have a right, people have a right to choose what they want to be a part of, what they want to participate in.
And this is a challenging question and topic because I don't know that any of us really have the answer.
That's time. Thank you. All right, that brings us to our final audience claim. Richard, you're up.
Hello again.
Hi.
The Virgin Islands should remove the Attorney General's office from under executive control and create a formal enforcement pipeline with the Office of the Inspector General so public corruption cases can be investigated and prosecuted without political interference. The Office of Inspector General has already been designed to have the ability to audit and to understand the nuances of government operations, to look for corruption and misuse and mismanagement. However, it serves underneath the office of the governor as well as the AG. What are your thoughts on creating a system that creates more independence and autonomy?
I strongly believe that the Inspector General's office should become an autonomous agency. The challenge with autonomy is they don't necessarily generate revenues. Usually when you're autonomous, you have a pipeline to generate your own revenues. So that's the challenge with it becoming a revenue generating agency. But what I will tell you is that the Office of the Inspector General over the years has not been funded at the level that it should. And I believe that based on the corruption that we've seen here in the territory, we should be putting a hotline in place where Virgin Islanders are able to call in and report their challenges, and the Office of the Inspector General will pick that up, and we provide the necessary funding to staff the IG office out in a way where they can provide the services, provide the investigators.
However, that's only one side of the coin. We still need to prosecute and convict. So what about the pipeline to the AG's office, which we have seen under this administration, the AG can go home if it's not serving at the pleasure of the governor?
Once the work is done, it goes to the Attorney General's office. I think there's been a lot of conversation about the Attorney General being elected. And when I think about that, that's a level of corruption that would be created as well, because we know that during elections you receive campaign donations. So it's a very it's a balance that you have to put in place, so to ensure that there's balance there.
But if you're worried about more avenues for corruption, the office of the governor and all of the senators are elected official, include some of our board members. So you're not creating a new opportunity for corruption. And once again, how will you handle the prevalent corruption in the Virgin Islands if the AG serves at your pleasure and they bring forth friends, family members, or contracts that you don't want to be touched?
You have to know who you're electing. I think that you have to elect individuals who are trustworthy, individuals that you know will not place the Virgin Islands in a position of such. And we have two choices to make.
Next questioner.
So the hotline already exists. Any citizen could call the Inspector General's office and submit in writing anonymously any claims of malfeasance or waste or abuse. It's typical that in public corruption cases only federal charges are brought. Would you support the Attorney General bringing local charges for public corruption?
Absolutely, but the hotline, I don't know the hotline number. I don't hear it advertised in this community that there's a hotline where you can call in. Government employees are not aware that there's a hotline. So this has to be something that's in our face, that is available to us, that every single person in this territory is aware of this hotline. And in fact, it works, and that in fact we are able to, we fund submit the legislation to, in fact, fund the Inspector General office in a way that it should be funded.
Pause. Next questioner.
So with your, well, if I'm understanding correctly, you're not necessarily supportive of the idea of the Attorney General being elected, or at least willing to state that support at this time, but as an alternative to addressing the concerns that the community has about the Attorney General being politicized or the Inspector General being politicized, or rather just controlled by the governor, what might be a middle ground to ensure there's a little more balance in that system without putting too much of the power in the voters' hands?
Well, first of all, it's not I'm not supportive of the Attorney General not being elected. We have, the people has to decide what they want to see when it comes to the Attorney General and understand what the pros and the cons are as it relates to that. As governor, I strongly believe that, you know, when the Attorney General brings a case, I actually worked in the Attorney General's office for 15 years. When the Attorney General brings a case before the government, before the people, that case should move forward, regardless of who it is. The governor should not get involved in that. So there is laws in the books that addresses challengers with political leaders, with leaders in the territory that's inserting themselves in situations. So invoke the laws.
Thank you.
Pause. Next questioner.
And this is a really important subject to me. When we speak about the Attorney General and the liberties of that office without the oversight of the governor, as well as the Inspector General, we've heard people pretty much ask, how do you see that change happening? The law's already in place, yet laws are being broken. We have people going to jail every day. So what is it that you see putting in place to stop this corruption and give accurate, because just because that case is moved forward and brought to a close doesn't mean that justice has been served. And that is part of the challenges that we face in the territory. It's not just a pipeline of criminals, it's a pipeline of security for the criminals. What do you see happening to change that?
Well, our judicial system also has to have to play a role in how cases are prosecuted, if you will. We have to ensure that the individuals that we have in these positions are individuals who will follow the law. And when we have leadership in the territory that's not following the law, I mean, recently I saw where funds were appropriated for X purpose, they were spent for Y purpose, but I haven't heard Virgin Islanders talk about it. That is an issue. And on the books, there is law that says if you use funds that's outside of the purpose that it was appropriated for, regardless of who that person is, they can and they should be prosecuted. And until we make an example, we, meaning our community, make an example of a governor, and in most instances it would be a governor because legislators don't spend money, but a governor or a commissioner, then we'll find ourselves in that same situation.
That's time.
Wow. I'm Donna Frett-Gregory, and I just completed 20 verses 1.